130 miles southwest of Paris, and a few minutes motoring time out of the old city of Le Mans, is the Circuit of the Sarthe. It consists of 8.5 miles of main roads, and although it is a permanent circuit with concrete and brick stands, it is used only once a year. In the middle weekend of June, the Circuit of the Sarthe becomes the focal point of interest for the motoring enthusiasts of the world. It is the scene of Les 24 Heures du Mans.
As crowds of eager spectators gather in and around the many grandstands, the 60 cars participating in the famous race are prepared and scrutinized. As the name implies, the Le Mans 24 Hours is a grueling test of endurance. A whole day devoted to pushing the boundaries and capabilities of man and machine. A hotbed for technological innovation amidst a backdrop of lush French countrysides. Winning here requires speed, durability, and willpower. 1955 would be the 23rd running of the race. This year saw intense rivalries between some of the world's most recognizable sports car brands. A three-way showdown between Ferrari, Jaguar, and Mercedes. The Italians had their 735 LM. Jaguar's competitor was their D-Type machine. The car had one major advantage over the rest of the field. You see, many race cars of this era used drum brakes, whereas the D-Type adopted the relatively new disc brake design. With stronger brakes that decelerate the car faster, the D-Type was capable of braking late, carrying more speed in and out of corners. With state-of-the-art technology up its sleeve, they also needed a star driver. The British outfit turned to local talent, Formula One driver Mike Hawthorne. Mercedes had the 300 SLR. The car had a 3-liter inline-8 that produced up to 276 horsepower. The body was made from a magnesium alloy that would allow the car to be lightweight in order to help with the corners and propel the car down the straights faster. The car proved its success earlier this year by taking a victory at the Mille Miglia, with Sir Stirling Moss behind the wheel. This year for Le Mans, 3 cars were entered, each with 2 drivers. Moss and Juan Manuel Fangio in the number 19 car. Number 21 piloted by Carl Kling and André Simon, and finally car 20 driven by John Fitch and Pierre Levet. The last time Mercedes won Le Mans was in 1952, but with 2 renowned Formula One drivers in their team and a competitive race car, the Silver Arrows seek to reclaim their glory. The Circuit de la Sarthe in 1955 was a completely different beast from what it is today. For one, the iconic Mulsanne Straight actually lived up to its moniker. A nearly 6-kilometer-long stretch of road that connected the towns of Le Mans and Mulsanne. Drivers there would have their accelerator through the floor for as long as a whole minute and a half. The start-finish straight was something of questionable quality. Since the entire track at the time was also a public road, the pits were essentially parking lanes on the side. There were no walls separating the pits from the track, nor were there speed limits, meaning racers often entered the pits at speeds exceeding 100 miles an hour. As the race start was approaching, the cars were lined up along the pit gallery. Drivers placed on the other side of the track had to run across, hop in their car, and race.
1 minute, 45 seconds, 30, 15.
In the early stages of the race, Eugenio Castellotti, driving Ferrari number 4, managed to hold on to the lead while keeping the Mercedes and Jaguars at bay. After the first hour, however, he misjudged his braking at the Mulsanne corner, allowing the Mercedes and Jaguars to pass. With the race closing into its 3rd hour, the battle between the Jaguars and the Silver Arrows continues to rage on. On lap 35, as the 2 teams darted down the start-finish straight, Hawthorne went in for a scheduled pit stop. As he veered right, Lance Macklin in the Austin Healey directly behind swerved hard left to avoid the slowing Jaguar. Narrowly avoiding a collision with Hawthorne, Macklin was now blocking Levet's path. The Mercedes was considerably faster than Macklin, closing in at over 100 miles an hour. There was no room to evade. Levet quickly raised his hand to warn Fangio, and shortly after, LeVay's Mercedes hits the rear left corner of Macklin's Austin Healey, which acted as a ramp, sending the Mercedes into the air. LeVay was launched out of his car, and the landing crushed his skull, killing him instantly. The car's trajectory was aimed at the crowded grandstands. It struck an embankment and was sent tumbling through the air, where it landed on the trackside. Debris from the car was flung towards spectators with great force. The engine and front suspension wiped out everyone in their path. The car's bonnet was described to have decapitated tightly jammed spectators like a guillotine. The force from the landing caused the fuel tank to rupture, setting the car's magnesium body into a blinding, fiery blaze. During all of this, Macklin's car bounced off the left barrier. It then skidded across the track, narrowly avoiding several other drivers. The car bounced off the pit gallery, where it then came to rest on the left side of the track. Macklin survived without any serious injuries. Firemen arriving on the scene had no knowledge that trying to put out the car's magnesium inferno with water only made things worse. Consequently, the blaze went on for hours. The catastrophe happened within view of co-driver John Fitch and LeVay's wife Denise Boleyn. His body could be seen amongst the fiery wreckage, and Fitch stayed with the distraught Boleyn until she could be consoled. Many would expect the race to be red flagged and cancelled. However, it wasn't the case. The race kept going. The leading theory being that the cancellation of the race would cause huge crowds to flood the main roads that were accessed by emergency services. Fitch urged Mercedes to withdraw from the race, seeing it would be a PR disaster whether they won or lost. Surely enough, a few hours after the crash, the two remaining 300 SLRs were returned to the pits. Now with Mercedes gone and the remaining Ferraris retiring all from various issues, Jaguar had no rivals left. By the 24th hour, Mike Hawthorne would take the win for Jaguar. Despite winning and feeling relieved, Hawthorne was still completely distraught from the disaster. 84 deaths along with 120 or more injuries were the result of this catastrophe. And after the race, news of the disaster sent shockwaves across the globe. It received widespread coverage from the media. Hawthorne was torn apart by the French press, who blamed the catastrophe squarely on him. Macklin believed that Hawthorne was to blame for the disaster until his death in 2002. Both Jaguar and Mercedes released official statements for the press, and in the days following, many European nations placed a temporary ban on all motorsports. By the end of 1955, Mercedes would withdraw from motorsports completely for the next 30 years.
Now they've made Dunlop Bridge much faster this year. By doing so, they've also made it safer.
Henry Ford asked the three drivers to come in at the same time. McLaren and Eamon in the 2 waited for Miles and Hume in the 1. 2, 1, 5, the winning Ford trio in 1966.
Down the long 3.5-mile Mulsanne Straight, 225 miles per hour.
From the early 80s onwards, the World Sports Car Championship, or WSC, would see the rise of the Group C prototype, a new class to replace the previous Group 5 and Group 6. The new top class was often characterized by sleek, silky bodywork, low weight, and copious use of turbochargers. All these traits combined allowed the class to be some of the fastest race cars of their time, reaching speeds as fast as 240 miles an hour, or more if one dared. As these cars were prototypes, they didn't require any road-going versions to be built. You might think that these things were excessive, and you're right, they really were. But this was the 1980s. Excess was its middle name. In the years leading up to 1989, Mercedes would strike a partnership with Sauber, providing engines for the Swiss engineering firm. Sauber had already been knee-deep in Group C racing with their previous cars, the C6 and C7, both of which were not good. The first project the new collaboration would conceive was the C8 in 1985. The car was fitted with a Mercedes-powered M117 5-liter V8 engine that produced up to 700 horsepower. The addition of 2 KKK turbochargers easily cranked those figures up to 800. In Thursday practice for Le Mans that year, the car qualified 18th. but shortly after, it suffered an accident down the Mulsanne. The damage was irreparable, so the car had to be retired. This would be the second pre-race incident, as earlier that day, a Porsche 956 and an Alba A2 race car collided at the Mulsanne kink. Each car practically disintegrated in the moments following the impact. Amazingly, both drivers, Dudley Wood and Jean-Pierre Frey, would escape with their lives, with Wood suffering a fractured leg. After Le Mans, the C8 wouldn't be entered in any of the remaining races for the 1985 calendar, but the following season in 1986 would see some success. A 9th place in Monza, 8th in Silverstone, and 6th at the race at Spa. More importantly, the C8 managed a victory at the 1,000 kilometers of Nürburgring. In the following season, the team would roll out the C9, an evolution of their C8. The car still used the same V8 twin-turbo engine, but it had numerous changes in aerodynamics to improve straight-line speed and overall agility. With a completely revised design, the 1987 season didn't live up to the team's expectations, with them finishing in a woeful 12th place in the Constructors, and only finishing one of the 5 races they entered. It's safe to say that the car was wholly unreliable. But in its run at Le Mans that year, car number 62, piloted by Johnny Dumfries, would set the fastest lap during the race, where it then retired from gearbox trouble. Despite its shortcomings, the car had something special. In 1988, AEG Olympia, a company that was owned by Daimler-Benz at that time, would sponsor the Sauber team, replacing Coros, which meant 2 things. The Coros team would officially become Sauber Mercedes, and more importantly, the team would receive more involvement from the factory. Now, with numerous improvements to the car, the 1988 season was considerably better. The C9 was competitive, taking 5 race victories and 7 podium places. By the end of the season, Sauber Mercedes would place 2nd in the constructors' standings, behind the almighty Jaguar team with their XJR9 race car. Even with their successes, their stint at Le Mans that year wasn't so great. The team was forced to withdraw from the event after Klaus Niedwitz in the number 62 car suffered a tire blowout while charging at nearly 220 miles an hour down the Mulsanne. It seems that one more year was needed before the car was truly ready. In 1989, the outdated M117 engine was swapped out and replaced with the M119. The new engine could handle more boost from the twin turbos, meaning that an extra 20 horsepower was added on top of the already powerful 800 that the M117 previously made. This, combined with the already light chassis weighing in at 905 kilos, allowed the car to be properly fast, which is something the team would soon find out. Major overhauls to the chassis and power unit aside, another notable change was in the looks department. The black AEG livery was swapped out for something more recognizable. The silver arrows were back. After the first 2 rounds of the 1989 WSC, the number 61 and 62 cars would collectively achieve 3 podiums and 1 race victory. A promising start, to say the least. Early June came Le Mans. This year, again, saw fierce competition. The Jaguar XJR9s that dominated the 1988 race, the Porsche 962C, and the Mazda 767B. But regardless of how heated the competition may be, the Silver Arrows are confident that they can pull through. During qualifying, car 61 would tear down the Mulsanne straight at a speed of 250 miles an hour, one of the fastest speeds ever recorded down the Mulsanne, only second to the WMP 88 that went 251 a year earlier. By the end of qualifying, Sauber Mercedes achieved a front row lockout for the race, taking both first and second. The XJR9s would lock out the second row, which meant one thing: the pressure was on.
Excellent news then for the French, from the French point of view. The WM Peugeot then out and into the race.
The end of lap 1 would see the number 3 Jaguar move into second place. The Jaguar then dove into first place, letting them know that they're dead set on keeping the throne. As the 2 rival teams duke it out, a privateer team, Yost, and a pink Porsche 962C would sneak into the top 6, keen on scoring some points or perhaps a victory. By hour 6, the number 3 Jaguar retires from an engine problem, and the Yost pink Porsche seizes the opportunity and snatches first place from the Silver Arrows.
Porsche, of course, which is now lapping in the 330s, darkness descending.
We have Dominic Dobson in, who
takes a while as well. Not a lot of a rush about it, I have to say. Looks as though he couldn't see. Looks as though there may have been a problem with the screen. He was gesturing very violently.
What's going on down with the leader?
The Porsche being examined with torches, and there's water being poured into it as we expect. It's already been at rest now for 50 seconds.
As night became day, the Mercedes would reclaim first place as the US Porsche fell 6 laps behind from a cooling fluid leak. And as the 24th hour passed, the Silver Arrows would take an amazing 1-2 finish. Their patience had finally paid off. Drivers Jochen Mass, Manuel Reuter, and Stanley Dickens of the number 63 car would all be first-time Le Mans winners. The top speed the C9 achieved in qualifying convinced the FIA to install 2 chicanes on the Mulsanne Straight the year after, in an effort to slow the cars down. Following Le Mans, the C9 became a dominant force for the rest of the WSC season, earning Mercedes a well-deserved constructors title. After 34 long years, the Silver Arrows have finally done it. They came back to Le Mans, took the crown from Jaguar, and had reclaimed their glory once more.
Put the stints together free of mechanical problems, and the orange and green 787B was remarkably reliable and consistent. Nobody would have bet on Mazda before the race, and yet it's the constructor from Fushu, thanks to the rotary engine, that scores the first Japanese win in the SART, this in Mazda's 13th attempt. At the end of a scarcely believable race, the McLaren of Sakaya, Leto and Dalmas manages to avoid the pitfalls to win the 1999.
The 1999 edition of the famous race would see the demise of the LMGT1 class. This class had production-based homologation, which meant that the cars were supposed to be based on already existing models in order to race. However, in 1996, Porsche decided to get creative. To put it very simply, they decided to just design a prototype that sort of looked like a model they were selling, but then they'd build 20 or so for the streets, and then build a few more for the track. Aside from front and rear lights, the Porsche 911 GT1 bared little resemblance to the 911 that was available at the time. The exploitation of this loophole got other teams like Nissan into building their R390, and more importantly, Mercedes with their CLK GTR. This car and its successor, the CLK LM, dominated the FIA GT Championship between 1997 and 1998. As for Le Mans, the CLK GTR didn't compete in 97. And for the 98 race, the CLK LM retired from an engine problem. Back to 1999, LMGTP would be the new top category for endurance car racing. Like Group C before it, these cars were prototypes which allowed the teams to go nuts, and no longer needed to creatively interpret rulebooks. This new category brought in manufacturers from all over for the 99 race. Toyota, BMW, Audi, Nissan, Panos, all bringing forth some competitive machinery. Mercedes rolled out their CLR race car, the final evolution of the CLK series, a car purpose-built for Le Mans. It had a new aero package that was sleeker and extensively tested. The car's powerhouse was a 5.7-liter V8 that was naturally aspirated and produced 600 horsepower. The weight was lowered as much as possible, as close to the 900 kg minimum. Mercedes-Benz motorsport manager Norbert Haug was pleased with the test results. They were confident in the CLR, but would it compete with the likes of the Toyota GT1, the BMW V12 LMR, or the Audi R8R? They would soon find out. Of the 3 cars they tested, only car number 4 was guaranteed a spot for the race. The number 5 and 6 cars would have to earn theirs through pre-qualifying. Even though all 3 CLRs made it to the final 48-car grid, they had subpar results. Car number 6 pre-qualified 6th, car number 4 and 5 placed 14th and 15th respectively. So, in the June qualifying sessions, they had to make sure that they were on pace. On the second qualifying day, the team would witness its first major incident with the CLR. Mark Webber in the number 4 car drafted an Audi R8R down the straight between the Mulsanne corner and Indianapolis. As it swerved to overtake, the CLR's front nose and wheels suddenly lifted, and shortly after, it went airborne at nearly 200 miles an hour. It somersaulted backwards, landed on its right side, and slid to the side of the track. No photos except for the aftermath were taken. Webber was sent to a nearby hospital where he quickly recovered. As for the car, it was swiftly repaired so it could be put back into action. Before the full race, a 30-minute warm-up session took place prior. Once again, the number 4 car, driven by, once again, Mark Webber, was tailing a Team Orica Dodge Viper down the Mulsanne straight. Entering Mulsanne corner, the CLR crested a hill, where it again lifted front first and hit a somersault across the air. The car slid to a halt just short of the straight's end, damaging its rear wing, engine cover, and front nose. Webber was unharmed. No live broadcast of the crash was captured, but its aftermath was. Mercedes withdrew car number 4 as they couldn't repair it before the race, and an all too familiar sense of dread struck them. A flying car would be a danger to both drivers and spectators, and the last time a Mercedes went airborne, it resulted in the worst accident in motorsports history. Although they weren't directly responsible for what happened to LeVay and the 84 spectators all those years ago, the pain of that memory still lingers. Last-minute adjustments to the remaining cars, such as dive planes, were installed, and the drivers were instructed to not get too close to others when drafting. They started 4th and 7th, whereas the Toyotas have locked out the front row. In the 5th hour, the number 5 car of Peter Dumbrick and a Toyota GT1 were battling down the straight between Mulsanne corner and Indianapolis. As the two cars made a slight right over a crest, Dumbrick broke out of the Toyota slipstream and, well...
Here we go. Oh my god, the Mercedes has taken off. That's Peter Dumbrick at the wheel of the number 5 Mercedes. The car flew right up in the air, over the barriers, over the wire. This is an awful accident. An awful accident.
Dumbrick was unconscious once the CLR struck the ground, but he managed to wake up and climb out of the wreckage. He was then transported to the local hospital where he was soon released. The area where Dumbrick landed was deforested 2 weeks prior and wasn't accessible to spectators, possibly saving his life and many more. Upon witnessing their extensively tested CLR go airborne for a 3rd time now, Mercedes immediately returned the number 6 car to their garage, where they retired shortly after. The rival BMWs would take the victory the next day. The cause of the CLR taking flight was due to its aero. If the front of the car tilts upwards for more than 2 degrees, instead of providing downforce, it produces lift like an airplane wing. If the front tilts upwards more, the lift becomes strong enough to send the car into a somersault. Every instance of the CLR taking flight happened under the same circumstances. They were drafting another car on a section of the track that had undulations that could easily upset the pitch. Following this horrific failure at Le Mans, this would be the final time the Silver Arrows would ever race here again. By the turn of the millennium, Mercedes had set its sights for touring car racing. But when the 2000s came to a close, they had a large stake in a small but dominant F1 team. In the 2010 season, Braun GP was renamed Mercedes GP, and for the next decade or so...
And Mercedes are going to make it back-to-back 1-2.
Lewis Hamilton wins the Turkish Grand Prix and is a 7-time champion of the world!
They've been a tad bit successful, tallying 8 back-to-back Constructors' Championships and 7 Drivers' titles, making them one of the most dominant teams in recent F1 history, but I digress. In 2021, the World Endurance Championship, WEC, retired LMP1 and replaced it with a new hypercar. This new category has sparked intrigue among manufacturers, some even returning to Le Mans in the coming years. Ferrari will be participating in 2023 with their 499P. Bentley has made considerations to return as well. As I'm currently writing this, Mercedes has made no official announcement to return to Le Mans. But considering their astounding success in F1, I'd like to see them tackle the Sarthe at some point in the near future. I mean, it took them 34 years to return to Le Mans between 55 and 89, so I'm predicting that they'll be back in the next decade. That's quite a ways away. But for now, the best we can do is hope.